trying to compress 137 chapters into about 20, 30-minute sessions. That's a pretty good job. What you did covering Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, if you're right. Okay. We've been kind of tracking that. In chapter 12 of Genesis. Repeated to Isaac in chapter 26 of Genesis. The land promise and ultimately the seed promise. So this morning we're going to go back and make a quick run through what was covered last quarter. In the event we have new people in the class and so forth, we want to bring everybody up to where we're at. You remember the end of Genesis? Joseph has invited his people, his dad, the descendants at that particular time, numbering about 70 to 80 people. And I guess I might ought to put a slide in. To come down into Egypt. And as they go down into Egypt, they are actually the honored guests of the Pharaoh at that particular time, based on what Joseph has done to preserve actually most of the world, I guess. Famine had been going on. So they are honored people. And as they come down, I think it's interesting. Joseph said, when Pharaoh asks you where you want to live, or what's your occupation, tell him you're a shepherd. Because the Egyptians say, a shepherd was an abomination to the Egyptians. So they were given the land of Canaan, land of Goshen, over, separate, and got the Canaan and had it ready. Given the land of Goshen, living as a separate group of people. But you know the story. As conditions do change. We begin the book of Genesis. I might mention as the book of Genesis ends. I want to look at one particular verse. Look at chapter 50. And let's see what Joseph said as he's about to die. Genesis chapter 50, verse 24. And Joseph said unto his brother, I die, and God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land, unto the land which he swore to Abraham, Isaac, and to Jacob. So here's some insight into what is going to happen. So when we get to the book of Exodus, in several years, conditions have changed. There are rulers who do not appreciate what Joseph had done. Fail to recognize that. And as they look about, they see this people who came down at 7 or 75. And Sunday had multiplied greatly, exceeding, I believe, some of the words that are used in Exodus chapter 1. So he is actually becoming afraid of what might happen if these people happen to join up with another country that might be at war with Egypt. He said, lest they be able to leave the country. So as a result of that fear and his failure recognize these people as someone, quote, special, he actually begins to put taskmasters over, begins to oppress it very harshly. Which it must have been a difficult time for these people. But God's plan is still taking place. He's going to make this group of people a distinct nation. He's not allowed them to mix with the Egyptians at this particular point. And he's also preparing a deliverer. And we know who that deliverer was. That was Moses. And we're introduced to that particular idea as they cry out for deliverance. God begins to speak to Moses. He's over in the land of Midian, been there 40 years. And God is about to send him back to Egypt to deliver his people. I think it's interesting if you look at Exodus chapter 6 and 7, you see God telling Moses, now there's about 3 different groups of people I want you to talk to as you go down, and tell them what's going to be the result of my actions. He said you need to call the Israelites, chapter 6, verses 6 through 8. He says, call them together and let them know that look at verse 6, I will redeem you with a stretched out arm and with great judgments. And I will take you to a land, I will make you a people, and I will be to you a God, and you should know that I am the Lord your God. He also says in chapter 7, I believe it's about verse 15, he says that the Egyptian people, they would know that I am the Lord. That's chapter 7, verse 5. Chapter 7, verse 17, he says, Pharaoh will know that I am the Lord. Of course, you remember the 10 plagues that came on the land, basically just devastating the nation of Egypt. And those 3 things were accomplished. Look at chapter 12, verse 31. Exodus chapter 12, verse 31. After the death of the firstborn, Pharaoh doesn't wait until morning. Verse 31 said he called Moses and Aaron by night and said, rise up and get you forth from among my people, both you and the children of Israel, and go and do what? Look at the next. Right. Serve the Lord, not your Lord. He says, serve the Lord, as you have said. And take your flocks, your herds, as you have said, and I always found this. And be gone and bless me also. So he's got the message, at least momentarily. And look at the next verse. The Egyptians were urgent upon the people that they might send them out of the land in haste, for they said, we be as dead men. So God has accomplished the 3 things that he said he would do, because the people are now coming out. He has redeemed them. So he's taking this group of slaves out of Egypt, carrying them to Mount Sinai, where he will give them the law and also make a covenant with them. Of course, his promises were conditional. He said, if they would obey him, they would be his chosen possession. to say, as they did in Exodus chapter 19, verse 9, all that the Lord has said or spoken, we will do. So, God tells Moses to yell at the people at the mountain. He would be giving them the commandments, the law, and so on. In chapter 20, verse 18, I believe it is, verse 20, chapter 20 and verse 18. As the people gathered around the mountain, it said, when they saw the smoke, saw the lightning, heard the thunder, the voice of the trumpet exceedingly loud, that they were afraid. So they asked Moses if he would speak to God, let God tell him what he would expect of them. And we see that happening in the next 3 or 4 chapters, about 21 to the early part of chapter 24. But as he gets to chapter 24, verse 7, it says, Moses took the book of the commandments and read it in the audience of the people, and they said, all that the Lord has said will we do and be obedient. So as this law is being given, or was given, and the covenant being ratified over those 4 or 5 chapters, we find these people not only saying we will do once, but they say it 3 different times. We'll see how long they stick to that. So this group of slaves that God has brought out of Egypt, he's now made them a distinct nation. He's their king. They have a law to guide their lives. Of course, I think beyond the shadow of a doubt, the first promise of Abraham has now been fulfilled. We see a great nation of people now under the direction of God's law. I want to take just a little back step this beginning. We're going to go to Genesis chapter 46. I'll look at verse 3. And this is not to say that the law is, this promise is not fulfilled here at Mount Sinai. There is a possibility, and I say possibility, that this nation promise may have been fulfilled earlier than Mount Sinai. Remember I said the promise, all 3 promises were made to Abraham, Isaac, and repeated to Jacob in chapter 28. Now, as Jacob is about to go down into Egypt with his people in Genesis chapter 46, verse 3 says, God said, I am God, the God of thy father. Fear not to go into Egypt, for I will there make of thee a great nation. I will go down with thee in Egypt, and I will also surely bring thee up again, and Joseph shall put his hand on thy knees. So, whether the nation promise was fulfilled in Egypt, we know there was a huge group of people, the same people that's at Mount Sinai. Whether it fulfilled there or at Mount Sinai, I don't think it's a big issue. Some people want to talk about that. But the main thing we need to remember is God's promise was fulfilled. And I think beyond a shadow of a doubt, at Sinai, they are both a physical nation and now a nation under God's rule. You remember how they went up from Mount Sinai up to the southern part of the land. They were sent the spies in. Of course, 10 of them said, we can't take it, particularly the Giants and the wall cities. And so as a result, in Numbers chapter 14, about verses 25 to the pronounces his judgment on these people. He said, for every day that the judges that the spy man, you're going to spend 1 year wandering in the wilderness. So there has been 40 years wandering, and he also said that all the men 20 years of age and older would die in the wilderness. Fast forward to Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 16. It says, and so it came to pass, when all the men of war were consumed and dead from the people, that God spoke to Moses and said, it's time to go. It's time to head up toward the land of Canaan. So as we have noted before, we saw these people come out of Egypt, come down Mount Sinai, eventually up to Kadesh Barnea. And now Moses has been told to take them up to the threshold of the land of Canaan. What was the instructions? When you go by, there are 3 nations that you're going to not pass. He said you're going to not mess with the Edomites, the Ammonites, and the Moabites. He said these are your kinfolk. But I think more important than that, what did he say he had done for these nations? He said, I have given it to them as a possession. And part of that giving is giants who were in the land. Think back one of the reasons the people said, we can't take the land again. No, there are giants there. God said, I drove them out of these 3 places. You think I couldn't have done it for you? And I can surely do it for you now. Because we're going to see in the lessons that follow. There were still giants in the land of Canaan. But God is able to do what he says he will do. So, we see these people then going up to the, come on. Nothing's happening.
Just showing the route. Go ahead.
Okay, all right. I just need to keep clicking. All right. So they're now up across the Jordan River, ready to go into the land. But there's a problem. And we see that particular problem answered in Numbers beginning in about chapter 20. God tells Moses, Numbers chapter 20, about verses 10 to 12. God tells Moses, he said, you and Aaron are not going to go into the land. He said, because you believed me not and did not sanctify me in the eyes of Israel. And you remember that occasion when he struck the rock and says, shall we bring forth water rather than giving God water? So as a result of that, in chapter 27, we see Moses asking God to appoint the one that would bring them into the land of Canaan. In verse 27, chapter 27 of Numbers, verses 18 and 19, we see this leader being appointed as a result of what God said. God said to Moses, you take Joshua, you set him in front of Eleazar the high priest, and the congregation of the people. Lay your hands on him and give him a charge. So Joshua didn't become the leader just because some people said, I think he better do it. God said, Joshua would be the one that would lead the people across the Jordan River and conquer the land of Canaan. Now, as they are about to go, which you remember, Moses made several speeches throughout the book of Deuteronomy. If you got two fingers that are pretty nimble, put one of them in Exodus chapter 33. I'm sorry, Exodus chapter 23. And one in Deuteronomy chapter 7. Exodus 23, Deuteronomy 7. I want you to notice something. These two passages are 40 years apart in time. Exodus chapter 23 is when the people were about to go into the land the first time. Deuteronomy is the time they're about to go into the second time. And look at these things. God has made some promises about what he would do, help them in battle, how he would bless them, and so forth, as long as he's faithful. In Exodus chapter 23 and verse 28, he said, to help you drive these people out, I'm going to send hornets into the land to help you. He makes that same statement in Deuteronomy chapter 7 and verse 1. He also said, in terms of blessings, in Exodus 23 and verse 25, he said, I will take sickness from among you. He now repeats that in Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 15. He also has some commands. He said, you got to drive out all the wicked inhabitants. You're to destroy all the idols in the land. And he gives a reason for that. In Exodus 23:33, he said, lest they become a snare to you. Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 16, lest they become a snare to you. So God doesn't forget. Makes the same promises both times that these people are about to go into the land that he's going to give them. Now, they may have been feeling pretty good about this time. Well, look what God's going to do for us. He kind of cuts it back down to size. Look over to Deuteronomy chapter 9 and verse 4. He said, let me tell you something about this driving out. I'm going to drive out the Canaanites because they are a very wicked people, not because of your righteousness. So don't get up to about how good you are. I guess we need to remember that sometimes too. We don't need to be buffed up thinking we're so righteous. God makes that point. I'm driving these people out because they're very wicked, not because they're so righteous. So remember that as you go into the land I'm giving you. So here we are as we get to the end of the book of Deuteronomy. A lot of things have happened since these people arrived on the plains of Moab. You remember how they had defeated Sihon, the king of the Amorites, and also Og, the king of Bashan. Am I there? No. It's tough when you can't see. world numbers, that's when Balak tries to get Balaam to curse the people. And God does not allow that to happen. So they escaped that particular thing, but many of them succumbed to the trickery that Balaam used trying to get them to enter, mingle with the Midianite people. And many of them do. They've also numbered the people again. Numbers chapter 26, verse 51. So there's 601,720 men of war, age 20 and above. That's basically the same number that came out of the land of Egypt. Moses has continued to encourage them. Told them not to be afraid. He gave those examples of how God drove out the giants and so forth from the land where those three nations possess the land now. Chapter 32 and also 33. You see him telling these people that there are a lot of blessings that come if you're faithful to God. But then there are also consequences for your failure to comply with God's law. As you get to chapter 32, verses 49 through about 51, we see the end of Moses' 5-year-old earth. God tells Moses, verse 49, he says, "Get thee up into this mountain, Mount Nebo, which is in the land of Moab that is over against Jericho, and behold the land of Canaan, which I give unto the children of Israel for possession. And die in the mountain, whither thou goest up, and be gathered unto thy people, as Aaron thy brother died in Mount Horeb, and was gathered unto his people." And then he reminds again why he's not going to get to go into the land. Verse 51, "Because ye transgressed against me among the children of Israel at the waters of Meribah, Kadesh, in the wilderness of Zin, because ye sanctified me not in the midst of the children of Israel." I think chapter 34 and verse 7 also gives us an indication that Moses did not die because he was physically frail. He died because he disobeyed God. Look at verse 7 of Deuteronomy chapter 3. Look at what it said about Moses. It said he was 120 years old when he died. His eyes were not dim, nor his natural force abated. So he was still strong physically. But God said, "You will not go into the land because you did not sanctify me." Verse 8 of chapter 34 of Deuteronomy says that the people wept for Moses for 30 days. Then, as we look at the first part of Joshua chapter 1, we see now it's time for Joshua to lead the people into the land. Verse 2, God said, "Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, thou and all this people, unto the land which I do give to them, even to the children of Israel." And then in verses 5 through 7, we see God giving Joshua encouragement. But he also has that same caveat. If you keep my commandments and so forth, then you will be able to do what they said. He said, "Therefore shall not any man," verse 5, "be able to stand before thee all the days of thy life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with thee. I will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. be strong and good courage. Verse 7, only be strong and very courageous, that thou mayest observe to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded thee. Turn not from it to the right hand or to the left, that thou mayest prosper whithersoever thou goest. So God's promises again are conditional. I want us to just take one verse as we close out the section. Turn over to Joshua chapter 3. And verse 14 is this is at the end of Joshua's life, and we'll cover this in the next year's life in the next 7 or 8 chapters. Joshua stood before the people and said, behold, this day I am going the way of all the earth, and ye know in all your hearts and all your souls that not one thing hath failed of all the good things which the Lord your God spake concerning you. All are come to pass unto you, and not one thing hath failed there. So God's promises are true. We can depend on them. If we comply with His law. I think that's what we need to get out of the way, all of this stuff that I'm trying to cover this morning. God's promises are conditional. That's all I have. Anybody have anything they want to add? Guess Wednesday night will be singing. Get ready to have the next 2 lessons. I'll be out of town. At least next time, maybe this week. You'll be ready to go next Sunday. Did everybody get a where can we go? Be expecting next time. And I surely want to encourage you to study those that's got JC by. Appreciate your attention. Oh, Allison.